Welcome to Light in the Dark podcast. I am your host, Lady B. Before we get into today's episode, I want to stress the words trigger warning. Topics discussed today may be triggering to some. You have been warned. Also, neither I nor the guest are licensed therapists, psychologists, counselors, etc. If you need a therapist, etc., then please seek a therapist, etc. There is no shame in getting your mental health together. Let me repeat that for the people in the back who did not hear. There is no shame in getting your mental health together. This podcast is about sharing our truths in a positive, safe, judgment free environment. Now, on that note, let's start the show. All right, so welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Iyanla, and we will continue to discuss church hurt. So I was trying to think of a time where I experienced church hurt, and there's not a lot of things that actually come to mind. Like there is this one time I asked a minister to read something that I had wrote. And mind you, it was, what I wrote was like very short. But I wanted this minister's opinion about it, and like, okay, so, do I need to add this, take away that, change this, just like a proofread. And mind you, it probably would have taken, 30 minutes or less. Well, why did it take like 2 to 3 weeks before I actually got feedback from that? And even within those 2 to 3 weeks, I had to continue to remind this person, like, hey, like, if you can get this done for me, then I can move on to like the next step. So I don't know if that's really considered church hurt, but hey, it involved the church to a degree. And I was hurt. So yes, we're gonna say that was church hurt. But ever since then, I looked at that person a bit differently. And maybe I shouldn't have, but I mean, it is what it is. I looked at that person a bit differently. And even to this day, I don't really communicate with that person like I used to, because there were some other things that came out about that person, or some other things that I noticed myself when it came to that person. And so that relationship, I guess you can say in a way, like fizzled out. But yeah, that that hurt. And then I got to thinking about, just ministers and preachers and pastors and clergy and just in general, and how we tend to put them on pedestals that they don't deserve to be on. In some ways, we move Jesus out the way and put, the preacher or the pastor on a pedestal in place of Jesus. And I say we because I was one of those people who did that for like the longest time. I did that. And then, whenever they make a mistake, or whenever they do something that, I felt like they should not have done, then it's like, oh, well, like you did this, you did that. And it wasn't their fault that I put them on the pedestal. It was my fault because I shouldn't have put them there to begin with. And so once they do something that I felt like they should not have done, then I'm looking at them sideways. But then, after some years, I had to be like, oh, this person is human just like I am. Just because they have a title doesn't really mean anything, because they're still human. They still do things that, you know, I can't just say regular people, but they still do things that other people do. And I think that's where grace comes in at. And, God had to show me like, hey, like I've shown you grace and mercy, then you need to show this person grace. They're human just like you are. They make mistakes just like you do. And then I look at people differently now. And so when it comes to preachers and pastors and so on and so forth, I look at them differently now, because now it's like, instead of me just taking their word for what the word says, you should actually go read it for yourself, instead of me. Oh, I guess in a way, putting them on the pedestal was idolizing them. I didn't realize that until like right now. Oh, wow. Okay, so that sucks. Anyway, um, yeah. Oh my God. You know what? This is turning into a therapy session, and I'm not trying to have a therapy session. I have a therapy session tomorrow.
It can be like that sometimes, and I totally get it. I thought about that too before when you were talking about putting pastors on pedestals. I did think about that when you said that. I'm like, I think that's like a form of idolatry, which is like a sin, like, putting them, like you said, over God. Like that's most definitely sin. I personally done that. I don't want to say I've personally, you know, idolized pastors or put them above all else, but I feel like I've done it by association because I have grown up watching my mom and my grandma do that when we're in church. So maybe by association I could have potentially, but consciously, I don't think I have. But then again, you never know.
I was not going to go here, but who Jesus? Okay. This might make it in, it might not. I don't know. But anyway. Oh, yeah, I wasn't gonna go here, but here I am. So one of my ex-husbands was a minister, and I know that I put him on a pedestal. I realized that I had put him on a pedestal and I had put him in the place of God. And when he did what he did, me and God had like this long conversation. And I was frustrated. And instead of me being frustrated with my then husband, I was frustrated with God because I was like, wow, so you allowed this to happen. And it took me a while to not be frustrated with God. It took me a while to be frustrated with the then husband because it was like, wait, so he made a choice to do what he did. But, ultimately, I realized that I had put him in a place in my life that he should not have been in. So instead of me listening to God, I was listening to my then husband. And so it's like, he's human, he did what he did. And I took it out on God because I was like, wow, God, so you knew that this was going to happen and you allowed me to get with this man anyway. And I felt like God didn't protect me. But ultimately, I realized that I had stopped listening to God a long time ago. And I had replaced God with this man. And I was listening to this man. And whatever this man said, 9 times out of 10, I agreed with it. And then, God had to show me, like, hey, you replaced me with him. That's on you. And so once I realized that, and then I was like, okay, God, like I repented and everything. And then it was like, God was showing me who this man really was. Like a person can only pretend to be someone for so long before the real them is revealed. And it was like, wow, so this is who that person was. I fell in love with who he was pretending to be. But once I saw the real him, then it was like, oh no, that is not what's up. Like I can't do this anymore. And then, once I took him off of that pedestal and I put God back where God was supposed to be at, then things started to slowly but surely change. And I remember, asking God, like, why did you allow to happen what happened? And, the response I got was to bring you out. And, me being me, I'm like, bring me out of what? Like, and, I didn't receive an answer at that time, but like over time, I've noticed that the answer has been like so many different things because I was in a shell. And it was like, to bring you out of that, to bring you out of your comfort zone, to bring you out of his shadow. It was just to bring me out of like so many different things. And now it's like so many doors have just been opened up since I put God back where God was supposed to be. Like I'm more talkative now. I'm in therapy. I'm doing a podcast. The clothing thing. I have one more thing that I'm trying to do. There's the book. There's like so many different things, and it's like, yeah, to bring you out of someone else's shadow. From trauma to healing. We shine in light in dark places, and it was like, yo, like you really was in a dark place back then. But yeah, I put that man on the pedestal, and it was like no, like that was your choice. And the thing about God is like, even though I did that, God was still there and God was still waiting. He was like, I know what you did. I know you're gonna come back. Apparently this is something that you just got to go through so you can learn something from it. But I'm still here. And now, God, I didn't think I was going there either. But hey, since I'm on that road, this has nothing to do with church. It seems like, this seems like a confession. Oh, bro. I'm not even gonna go there with that song. Anyway, um, man, I remember what, like a year and something ago, almost a year and a half ago, when I tried to commit suicide. And I was like, oh, I can't live without this man. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't want to live without him, so on and so forth. Bro, like I was so messed up mentally and emotionally. And then God was like, okay, but it's not time. Like it's not time for you to go. I'm not calling you home. It's not time. You still have work to do. And, like I thank God that I'm still here. And me and, the ex husband are no longer together. Um, the relationship went from good to bad. But I thank God that, it's over and done with. And, like I'm still here. How did we go from church hurt to like toxic stuff?
Because it honestly, it's closely related. And I am super duper thankful that you're still here too. I'm, you know, the book, the book that is your life. I know you still have a bunch of chapters to write, and I want to be a witness to reading them all. So I'm thankful that you're still here too. And I know the correlation. It doesn't seem like there is one, but church hurt and toxic relationships and putting people on pedestals, it's all really, really closely, more closely related than we think. And I would definitely love to do like a deep dive on that aspect because I feel like this is another topic that is not discussed frequently enough. We don't have an outlet where we can express these grievances and these circumstances because in our church community, we say that it's not prevalent, it's uncommon, but it really is more common. And my whole grievance with, the church community is that we just really tend to sweep things under the rug, things that like very much need to be talked about and discussed. We sweep it under the rug and we get up, we stand up and we sing our hymnals and we take out our Bibles and we read and we close out in prayer and we do our communion, but we don't acknowledge anything else. And I feel like that's why there's so much disparity in the church community and why church hurt is so prevalent in these more recent years. It's always been a prevalent matter, but in these more recent years, it just seems like it's getting really, really to a point where it's like everywhere you look, like you can't go to your church down the street without risking, okay, what kind of church is this going to be? Like, I genuinely have that anxiety. I'm like, I'm afraid to go to my local churches because like I've been to like 10 churches since I moved back. And each and every church I've been to, there's been some kind of discrepancy with the community and with the word. And I just want to protect my peace. I want to protect my faith and everything. And I feel like I'm jeopardizing it going outside at these mainstream churches. Like I don't know what's going on. It's crazy.
I remember being like a couple of years ago because so like a couple of years ago, when he and I were together but not together, child, I remember that in some ways we were faking it and no one knew, and if they did know, they didn't say anything. But we used to go to church like together, the same car, and then it got to the point where we was just going in separate cars. And on the inside, it's like, you're hurt, you're just full of broken pieces. But on the outside, you still dressed up, you still clapping, you still reading the scriptures, you still doing those things that you're supposed to be doing because that people are watching. And when people ask you how you're doing, it's like, oh, okay, I'm fine. And that's what we tend to do. And it's like on the inside, you're just broke. Like you're just full of broken pieces. And it's like you don't feel comfortable talking to anyone. And that's sad because it seems like in church you should have that fellowship. It should feel like a community, and you should be able to feel like you can talk to, I'm not going to say anyone, but you should be able to feel like you can talk to someone and not feel like they're going to judge you for whatever may be going on with you. I remember having a conversation with one of the ministers, and I was like, he puts on one way, but that's not the way that he really is. And the minister was like, yeah, we know. And that in my mind, the moment I heard, yeah, we know, it was like, wait, are you serious? Like, y'all know, but didn't nobody tell me. It's like, y'all know that this person is out here perpetrating. And I didn't know how much he was perpetrating. But it's like, y'all know that this person is out here perpetrating. And yet y'all are continuing to not say nothing to him about it. And it's like, wow, okay. So then there's a little bit more distrust that came along with me, because it's like, okay, so you know this, but you're not saying anything to him. Like, I can say something to him and it's going to go in one ear and out the other because it's me saying it. But if it's someone else who says it, then to me it felt like it held more weight, which is kind of sort of stupid, because it's like, if your wife says something to you, it should hold more weight than someone outside of the relationship. But that's a whole nother topic, child. Uh, that is a whole nother topic. I may have to do a topic about that one day, but that is a whole nother topic. But yeah,
But I
like,
agree with what you're saying.
it seems like being in the church, we should be able to have this community in the church. And sometimes it doesn't feel that way. And that's sad. We should be able to feel like we can talk to someone in the church and not have our business, you know, be out in the church, 5 seconds after we're done talking. But it's not always that way. Sometimes, you in church and you feel like you can't really talk to anybody in church because there are a whole lot of judgmental people in church. So, like, where's that safety at? Because if you're not safe in church, then where are you safe at?
That is true. I agree. This is why I don't leave my house sometimes. Like I have my devotional time with my pastor. He has a live stream and I watch it. I make my breakfast. My boyfriend and I sit down and watch, and that's been enough for me these past few years. And I've been trying to like wrap my head around that because like you said, I always wanted to have like a church community where I could go and sit down and have that sense of community, but you really can't nowadays. And it's really unfortunate. And like you said, the church, how the church is presented, and in the Christian religion is that's supposed to be like our safe haven, that's where we're supposed to go and nothing else makes sense. And it's like, we don't even have that. We don't even have that ground to stand on. So where do we stand? That makes things so much more difficult. And a lot of the times with these pastors, they, like you said, they do get put on a pedestal, and a lot of their bad behavior goes unchecked, or, they receive a pass, whereas we wouldn't, and at the end of the day, they are still human like we do. They still have to close their eyes and go to sleep like we do. Like they're no different than us. So that's like a great topic to cover on, to discuss those issues within the community, because it creates a lot of disparity. And like you said, when it comes to privacy and all these other aspects, it's really difficult to have that safety. I've actually experienced that directly with my mom, because I would tell her things in confidence and she would immediately go and tell my grandma and all these other family members. And like your parents are supposed to, in essence, are supposed to be like your safe space, similar to how, the church is supposed to be, like our church community. Your parents are supposed to be your safe space. Well, what do you do when not only do you not have a church to go to and feel safe, but what if you don't have parents you can go to and feel safe either? Then it's like, where do you really stand? So that's like another thing, another aspect within the Christian community that I feel like definitely needs to be addressed.
Like, as you were talking, I was thinking that church is almost like the hospital. Like the people who go to church, of course we all have something wrong with us and we're all seeking Jesus. So we go to church, right? So the church is like the hospital. The church is where people go to get well. But I got to thinking and I was like, well, how many people are dying in the church? So many people. You go to church to get well, but they're dying in the church. Their spirits are dying in the church. They're not getting fed in the church. And they continue to go to the same church because they mama went, they grandma went, they great grandma went. And they're not getting spiritually fed in this church. They're just going because, hey, this is what my family has always done. This is what we do. We've done this for generations, and this pastor baptized, my mom and my grandma, and he gonna baptize me too. And so many people are dying spiritually in the church and will not leave the church because they have been going to that church for so many years, or they don't want to start over in a new church, or they know how things are ran in this church and they're comfortable in this church, and yet you're dying in this church. Like this minister is not feeding you spiritually. The spirit is not in this church. And yet people stay, and I'm like, why? You're slowly dying and you don't want to do anything about it because you're comfortable here. And that makes no sense to me at all.
I agree. I really do. Like, that's a really good topic. Again, like something I really feel like we need to actually have a deep dive into, like as a joint collective, because that's something that's very prevalent. I've had friends of mine speak on that, on, not being spiritually fed, spiritually nourished. And that's why, like, when I was in California, before I found the pastor I have now, who I love, when I was church hunting in California before I found him, I was not feeling spiritually fed. Like, I would go into churches and I felt drained. Like, I would sit there and listen to the sermon, and I would feel so drained, so unfulfilled, unhappy. And that's like something we don't talk about enough. And it's like, I can't just stay here. I had a friend of mine that I didn't talk to anymore, that we had found a church, and I guess she was just over looking for churches. And so, I'm just gonna go to this one. It's by my apartment. And I said, okay. And I kept looking and I kept searching and I kept driving farther and farther away from the city we're in. And I found him. And I do not regret my decision. It's worth a 30-minute drive. So it's just like you said, she was perfectly okay with being at this church because it was close to campus, that she's like sacrificing her spiritual nourishment for complacency, like you mentioned. And that really broke my heart, because it's not worth it. At some point you have to stand up and realize, okay, my mind, body, and spirit is more important than, in this example that I'm using, distance from my college apartment. There has to be some kind of priority where you prioritize yourself and ensuring that your inner satisfactions are being met, as well as your spiritual satisfactions, and being in the church and being nourished and being happy and feeling fulfilled and not drained by wherever church you're going to. You should be excited to go to church and take out your Bible and pray and sing hymnals. I know she wasn't feeling that way where she was at, because she was settling, basically. And you should never settle when it comes to God and finding your community. You should never settle. And I tried to explain that to her, I really did, but she was like, like, this is what works for me, and this is close by, and it's okay. And I was like, well, I have to let people make their own decisions. But I kept going. I continued to make the drive out to my pastor's church, and I do not regret my decision to this day, because it's like the fact that I still listen to him this day, is insane. Like, I was not expecting his church to have such an impact on me the way it did. And I'm so happy. I feel so fulfilled that I stuck it out and I continued to church hunt, and I committed to finding a church, because I was really, really proud of myself. I still listen to his sermons now, and I have not found anything to match the energy and all the knowledge he had.
I'm glad though that like you were able to find that, and like you were being spiritually fed. And unfortunately, your friend just settled, and there's really nothing that you can do about it. It's sad, but like that's what so many people do. So many people settle and they're comfortable. And eventually you have to get out of being comfortable. Oh my God. Okay, so this is going in places I didn't think it was going. But anyway, yeah, settling. That's a whole different conversation. A whole different conversation.
We must be comfortable with being uncomfortable, is what my mentor, that's the way that she presented to me, because I was mentioning to her about like different job opportunities and not being sure what my future would look like doing this job or that job. And she said, be uncomfortable. Oh, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I was like, what do you mean be comfortable being uncomfortable? Like, no, I don't like being uncomfortable. I want to be comfortable. And she said, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I sat and I thought it over and I was like, okay, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Okay. And when I realized, when I said it to myself and I sat down and I let those words marinate in my head, I was like, okay, she means don't be afraid to take that next step in your life, even if you're not sure where it's going to go. Be comfortable and be settled in the fact that God has your back and he
Yep.
will never leave or forsake you. And a long time ago, I would not be where I am today had I not those two footprints not become one. Had those two footprints not become one, I don't know where I would be today. I don't know what I'd be doing with my life. So being comfortable with being uncomfortable makes so much sense in every aspect. Just like with finding a church in this present example, you have to be comfortable in being uncomfortable by going to different churches in hopes that one day you will find that church that you're comfortable and happy at. You just have to sit out the process and wait that process out and, trial and error. And, that's something that I really, really think is crucial in order to manage in a world like this one.
I like the sound of be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I may have to use that one day. um,
Copyright Iyanla. Just
but
kidding.
that does make sense though, because once you get comfortable in something, you become complacent, you become stagnant, and you don't move, and life just passes you by. But it's getting that time though. We're about to end this one here too. This has been another episode of Light in the Dark podcast. I am your host, Lady B, and on today's episode, we had Iyanla. So until next time,
Bye, guys.
deuces.
Peace.